International efforts are continuing, of course, as the pause in the fighting between Israel and Hamas has entered its final day. There are reports that the truce may be extended, with Egypt and Qatar close to extending it by 2 days. US President Joe Biden says he wants to see more hostages released.
Abigail was among 13 hostages released today from Gaza under the brokered and sustained, though intensive, U.S. diplomacy. She's now safely in Israel, and we continue to press and expect for additional Americans will be released as well. And we will not stop working until every hostage is returned to their loved ones.
When it comes as thousands marched in central London at the weekend, pro-Palestine supporters called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, and tens of thousands marched against anti-Semitism. With the deadline fast approaching, can that ceasefire be extended? I'm joined now by Admiral Dr Chris Parry, former NATO commander. Afternoon to you, Chris. Always good to get your take on these things. Let's look at that extension. Egypt are talking about it. They say it's close. What are your senses?
Well, I suspect it will be extended, but it's not in Hamas's interest, of course, to release every single hostage that they've got. They can blackmail Israel into extending this even further. The problem for Israel, of course, is they've got a window of legitimacy in which they can obviously deal with Hamas and deal with the threat that's coming from Gaza. If you extend it much longer, that window of legitimacy is going to stop and close. And the world will think, well, you know, you're resuming something that we really don't like very much.
And I guess one of the issues around this, Chris, is, great, a 48-hour extension, fantastic. But then what happens on the next hour after that?
Absolutely. As I said, I think Hamas will want to stretch it out, as long as possible, and they'll keep the hostages to that extent. The problem for Israel is they've got to deal with a threat that will come back at them. In fact, the threat has already said it will come back at them, and they intend to do it again. So unless Israel deals with the threat in Gaza, then they're going to have a recurring problem. There's another issue too, Ian. They've got Hezbollah sitting on their northern border in Lebanon with 5 times the amount of missiles and rockets that Hamas have. They've got a very disciplined army of about 50,000. And I have to say, they have to show what they would do to Hezbollah if Hezbollah even breathed across the northern border by sorting out Hamas. So the Israelis are in a bit of a quandary. They've got to balance getting the hostages out with achieving the objectives of their campaign.
And, of course, that objective to rid the area of Hamas never ceases, right? I mean, even if, the rockets stopped and the retaliation stopped, that is still first and foremost at the top of Israel's agenda, that Hamas have to go.
Absolutely. And I think we mustn't underestimate the emotional component here. 7th of October was a serious violation, not just of Israel's women, but also of the country itself. And we can't expect fully rational councils to prevail. There's an element of revenge here. There's an element of actually saying we never want this to happen again. And as I said, there's a deterrent effect on anybody else, including Hezbollah, who thinks they might want to try it anywhere around Israel's borders elsewhere. That includes Syria, Hezbollah, anybody else.
What is your sense of Israel's own internal problems? Because that, of course, is very central to how they respond going forward. We know that Netanyahu, Chris, is in a fairly brittle position in many respects. Certainly doesn't have full support of his own parliament and not necessarily full support of his own country either.
No, there's nothing like a war to galvanise a country, though. And I think right now they don't want to change horses while they have a full-scale war going on in the south. They also want Netanyahu to own this war. It happened on his watch, and it's up to him to clear up the mess that he created. And you're right, Ian, we shouldn't underestimate how incredibly divided and divisive the political establishment was before the 7th of October. But right now, from what I'm hearing, almost everybody in Israel is right behind whatever administration is in charge to actually deal with Hamas, get the justice for the victims of 7th of October, and ensure it never happens again.
Chris, as ever, thank you. That's Admiral Dr Chris Parry with us here on TalkTV.